For 17 years, it was the perfect murder. Claire Morris, 32 years old, a nurse from Aberdeenshire, died when the car she was travelling in crashed and burst into flames on a remote Scottish road in May 1994. Her husband, Malcolm Webster, escaped with barely a scratch. At the funeral, Claire's brother Peter held Malcolm's hand as they both wept. Peter was convinced they were grieving together. He had lost his sister. Malcolm had lost his wife. Or so it seemed. What Peter didn't know was that he was holding the hand of his sister's murderer. Malcolm John Webster was born on the 18th of April, 1959 in Wandsworth, London. His father, Alexander Webster, was a detective chief superintendent in the Metropolitan Police, heading up the fraud squad. His mother, Odette Blewett, had been a nurse. From the outside, it looked like a respectable family. But from childhood, Malcolm showed concerning behaviours. He would pretend to faint for attention. He started fires, earning himself the nickname Pyro amongst those who knew him. As a teenager, he told people he had cancer. He was fabricating illnesses, seeking sympathy, manipulating those around him. Malcolm left school at 15 with no qualifications. He drifted through jobs: nurse, bin man, driver, office clerk. He had a favourite saying that perhaps revealed more than he intended. Why work hard yourself when someone could be doing it for you? In 1989, at the age of 30, Malcolm got a job at Tawam Hospital in Abu Dhabi, working on the children's ward. Within 6 months, 3 children under the age of 6 died of cardiac failure whilst under his care. Cardiac failure in children that young is highly unusual. A former colleague, Beth Brown, would later state that supervisors discovered Webster had been injecting himself with insulin. They formed the opinion that he had killed the children with insulin injections. There was insufficient evidence for a police investigation. It's alleged that Malcolm's father used his influence to extract his son from the UAE before any charges could be filed. No action was ever taken. The theory amongst some investigators would later be that Webster had used these children as guinea pigs, testing doses for future crimes. Malcolm returned to the UK, and in 1991, whilst working at Aberdeen Royal Infirmary, he met Claire Morris. Claire was 32 years old, also a nurse, from Old Meldrum in Aberdeenshire. Her brother Peter's first impression of Malcolm was that he seemed cheeky and roguish, intelligent, pleasant, and caring. Claire was besotted with him, but her mother, Betty, sensed something was wrong. She found him strange. There was something about Malcolm Webster that didn't sit right. On 3rd September 1993, Malcolm and Claire married. Almost immediately, Claire's health began to deteriorate rapidly. She became tired. She couldn't concentrate. She became entirely reliant on Malcolm for her daily care and well-being. What Claire didn't know was that her husband was drugging her with temazepam, a benzodiazepine sedative. Just the day before she died, Claire told her friend Leslie Roberts, "I'm not right. I'm tired and I can't concentrate." A few weeks before that, Malcolm had staged what appeared to be a practice run. He'd driven their car into a ditch, testing how it would look, how it would feel. On the 27th of May, 1994, just 8 months after their wedding, Malcolm put his plan into action. The location was the Auchenhoove to Tarvers Road in Mill of Kingoody Borty, Aberdeenshire. A remote stretch of road. Quiet, isolated. Malcolm drugged Claire with temazepam until she was unconscious. He drove to this remote location and parked the car near a tree. Then he set the vehicle on fire with Claire still in the passenger seat. An off-duty policeman happened upon the scene and stopped to help. Malcolm told him there was no one else in the car. He said it again. Twice he assured the officer that he was alone. The car exploded. Claire Morris burned to death. Malcolm was taken to hospital. Tests were conducted. His pulse was normal, His heart rate was normal. His blood pressure was normal. Everything was textbook normal for someone who had supposedly just survived a horrific crash. The hospital was satisfied that he was completely uninjured, but Malcolm claimed he had been hurt. At Claire's funeral, he wore a neck brace. He stood beside Peter, Claire's brother, both men with tears streaming down their faces. Peter held Malcolm's hand tightly. He would later recall, "He was actually squeezing my hand." Most people had their heads down, and I glanced at him and he was full of tears, as I was. And that convinced me up until 3 years ago that he had lost his wife in an accident. In reality, I was holding the hand of her murderer. The police investigation noted some suspicious elements. There were no skid marks at the scene. There was no crash damage on the vehicle. The car had been travelling slowly. Derek MacDonald, a firefighter who attended the scene, said, "We all thought it was a bit hooky." There was no sign of violence to the vehicle. For a car to be stopped or parked and burst into flames does not occur. Claire's friend Leslie Roberts also had concerns. She'd gone to Malcolm and Claire's cottage immediately after the crash to collect some of Malcolm's belongings to take to him at the hospital. On the table, she saw epilepsy drugs. Neither Claire nor Malcolm had epilepsy. She was suspicious. She knew something wasn't right. At the funeral, Malcolm sobbed and seemed upset, but Leslie couldn't shake the feeling he'd had a hand in Claire's death. Leslie told the police her fears. They were dismissed. One officer did investigate in his spare time. He had concerns. Claire had not been able to escape. The car had been travelling slowly. There was an absence of skid marks, but the death was ruled accidental. Malcolm Webster claimed over $200,000 from insurance policies. Within 6 months, he'd spent the entire amount. He bought a Land Rover Discovery. He bought a yacht. He spent money on gifts for other women he was pursuing. The perfect murder. Or so it seemed. In 1996, Malcolm met Felicity Drumm. She was an oncology nurse from Auckland, New Zealand. They met in Saudi Arabia, where both were working. She found him attentive and entertaining. On the 26th of April, 1997, they married. Their honeymoon was spent at Cook's Beach on the Coromandel Peninsula in New Zealand. On the first night, Malcolm made Felicity a cup of tea. What happened next was extraordinary. Felicity would later testify, "It was 36 hours before I woke up again." I had no explanation for it. Malcolm is all about control. There was another incident during the honeymoon. After Malcolm bought breakfast one morning, Felicity experienced double vision and felt unwell. She slept for 18 hours. The drugging continued throughout their marriage and throughout Felicity's pregnancy. Food tasted acrid and bitter. She experienced double vision. She felt drunk. She needed help to walk. Blood tests showed liver abnormalities. Malcolm was drugging Felicity throughout her pregnancy to the danger of her life and the well-being of her unborn child. Their son Edward was born in November 1998. Edward suffered from severe eczema that cleared up within weeks after Malcolm left the family. It's believed the baby had been exposed to the drugs whilst in utero. During their marriage, there were 3 house fires. In September 1997, a fire at their cottage in Line of Skane, Scotland. In January 1999, a fire at a property they were intending to buy in Bayswater, Auckland. Another fire at Felicity's parents' home in Takapuna. Malcolm had added his name to Felicity's bank account. Nearly all of the 140,000 New Zealand dollars she had saved, which is around 80,000 US dollars, vanished. He told her he had cancer. He told her he had heart problems. All lies. He also took out insurance policies on Felicity's life. 9 separate policies, worth approximately $750,000. The deadline for payment on a house they were buying in Auckland was the 12th of February, 1999. Malcolm had been making excuses about why his money hadn't been transferred from Scotland to pay for it. That morning, they drove to the bank together. Malcolm was at the wheel of Felicity's Honda Accord. Suddenly, he claimed there was something wrong with the steering wheel. The car swerved across 2 lanes of the motorway, accelerating to 60 miles per hour, veering towards a power pole. Felicity grabbed the steering wheel. She found that it worked perfectly. The car ended up in a ditch. Webster immediately jumped out and opened the boot. Inside were newspapers and petrol. He screamed at Felicity repeatedly to stay in the car. She refused. She got out and phoned her lawyer to drive her to the bank. Malcolm feigned a heart attack. While he was at the hospital, he cleaned out their joint bank account. 1 week later, there was a second murder attempt. Malcolm and Felicity took a trip to a rural area north of Auckland. Felicity was driving. She drank from a water bottle. The next thing she remembered was waking up in the passenger seat in a forest when her phone rang. That phone call saved her life. When Malcolm returned to the car, he was furious. "What the hell are you doing awake?" he demanded. Police later found petrol, wood, and newspapers in the boot. Felicity's father, Edward, discovered 9 forged insurance policies on Felicity's life. When Felicity confronted Malcolm about trying to kill her, his response was chilling. "You would have died happy." Felicity went to Takapuna police station and made a formal statement. Hair testing confirmed she had been drugged throughout her pregnancy. Malcolm fled New Zealand before charges could be filed. He took over $390,000 of Felicity's money with him, leaving her with just $12 in her bank account. In July 2000, 4 arrest warrants were issued in New Zealand for Malcolm Webster. 2 for arson, 1 for administering drugs, 1 for disabling a victim. New Zealand police tried for years to get Scottish police to arrest him. Initially, they were unsuccessful. Malcolm Webster returned to Scotland. In 2002, he began a relationship with Christina Willis. He habitually borrowed money from her without repayment. He burned a computer hard drive in her garden. He told her he had cancer. He persuaded her to make a will in her name and give him power of attorney. There's no evidence he tried to kill Christina. It's speculated that he found a wealthier target. In December 2005, Malcolm met Simone Banerjee. She was a 41-year-old NHS manager in Oban. Simone was independently wealthy. Her father was a retired consultant surgeon with a trust fund. She owned a house. She had $50,000 in shares. She owned a 50% share in a 38-foot ocean-going yacht. Malcolm told Simone he had terminal chronic lymphatic leukemia. He claimed he was undergoing chemotherapy. To make the lie convincing, he shaved his head. Simone changed her will, leaving everything to Malcolm. They planned a transatlantic sailing honeymoon. The route would take them from the Canary Islands to the Caribbean on her yacht. Police would later believe Malcolm intended a staged boating accident drowning. After his conviction, Simone discovered that the foil on her life jacket had been punctured. "Everybody else's life jackets were fine," she said. "I have pretty much no doubt that the boat was the way it was going to go." In the spring of 2006, the Oban Angling Club reported that $4,000 was missing. Malcolm Webster had been the treasurer. The embezzlement investigation brought Malcolm to the attention of Detective Inspector Charles Henry. In June 2006, something happened that would change everything. Jane Drumm, Felicity's sister, was a domestic violence expert. She attended a police conference in Britain. She spoke to officers about her shock at discovering her sister had been in a road accident, an accident that seemed to mirror perfectly the tragic accident that had killed Malcolm Webster's first wife. 2 car crashes, 11,000 miles apart. 5 years apart. Same pattern, same man. Jane Drumm went directly to a chief superintendent and demanded action. This conversation changed everything. In 2007, police searched Simone Banerjee's house. They seized a stolen laptop and an unlicensed gun. Police learned of the planned transatlantic yacht honeymoon. Detective Inspector Charles Henry became alarmed. Webster is a potential serial killer, and it was the ideal scenario for him, Henry said. Simone was in absolute danger. I was convinced she was going to be the next victim. Them sailing out into international waters absolutely horrified us. In January 2008, police issued an Osman warning to Simone Banerjee. The warning revealed that Malcolm had a wife and son. When Simone confronted him, she said, "He went absolutely white. He went very, very quiet. I wished I was not in the room. I have never seen him like that before." In March 2008, police announced they were re-examining Claire Morris's death. The investigation was called Operation Field. The breakthrough came from a tiny fragment of Claire's liver tissue that had been preserved in paraffin wax after the post-mortem in 1994. Scientists developed an innovative de-waxing technique that had never been needed before. They were able to extract and test tissue that was 14 years old. The result showed a 92.4% probability that temazepam was present in Claire's liver. Claire had never been prescribed temazepam. Malcolm Webster had access to it as a nurse at Aberdeen Royal Infirmary. This single piece of evidence transformed the case. The investigation was compared to Lockerbie in its complexity. It lasted 5 years. More than 1,000 people were interviewed. Over 1,200 pieces of evidence were collected. 90 search warrants were executed. Witnesses came from 6 countries. Detective Chief Inspector Phil Chapman and 5 colleagues spent a month in New Zealand. The FBI assisted in interviewing expatriates. 11 witnesses travelled from New Zealand to Scotland for the trial. The trial began on the 1st of February 2011 at the High Court of Justiciary in Glasgow. It would last 16 weeks, the longest criminal trial with a single accused in Scottish history. The prosecution took 50 days to present evidence. The defence acknowledged Webster was a liar, a philanderer, a thief, and a ratbag, but not a killer. Key witnesses emerged. Ian Hardy testified he'd seen Webster at the crash site 11 days before the accident. Forensic investigator Andrew Wade said, "My first impressions were that it didn't look right." He concluded it was deliberate fire setting. Felicity described the 36-hour sleep, the drugged food, waking in the forest to Webster's fury. Peter Morris testified about holding Webster's hand at the funeral, both crying. "In reality," he said, "I was holding the hand of her murderer." On the 19th of May 2011, the jury deliberated for less than 4 hours. Guilty of murdering Claire Morris. Guilty of attempting to murder Felicity Drumm. Guilty of fraud, theft, arson, drugging, and attempted bigamy. Webster showed little emotion. On 5th July 2011, Lord Bannatyne sentenced Malcolm Webster to life imprisonment with a minimum of 30 years. One of the longest jail terms ever imposed in Scotland. This was a murder which could properly be described as cold-blooded, brutal and callous, the judge said. The motive was the utterly base one of financial gain. "You have shown absolutely no remorse. I have formed the clear view you are a considerable danger to women." Peter Morris spoke outside court. For 17 years, it was the perfect murder. He got away with it for 17 years because he made it look like an accident. Webster appealed multiple times. All appeals were rejected. By February 2016, every legal avenue was exhausted. He's currently in HMP Shotts, Lanarkshire. He reportedly told inmates he expects to die in prison. He continues to maintain his innocence. he'll be eligible for parole in 2041, when he'll be 82 years old. Claire's family fought to replace her headstone, removing any reference to her marriage. Eventually, the council agreed. Webster was banned from being buried alongside her. In December 2019, Peter Morris died at the age of 56. He had campaigned tirelessly for justice for his sister. Malcolm Webster hunted wealthy women for nearly 3 decades. He drugged them, set fires, staged crashes, all for money. He was diagnosed with narcissistic personality disorder. A police profiler labelled him a sociopath. Claire Morris was 32 years old when she died. A nurse, a daughter, a sister. She deserved better than the 8 months of marriage before her husband murdered her for money.